Dear students, good morning. Welcome to Law Excellence IAS. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 13th August 2020. The first article for discussion is Stop the Dismantling of the Environmental Laws. This is article by Ms. Sonia Gandhi. In this article, what she says is, in India, government shall work to sensitize industry that environmental regulation is for collective good. Today, what the government is doing, it is trying to play to the world. There will be a trade-off between environmental protection and economic development. But in the long run, environmental development has to go along with the ecological protection. This is what is the take-home point from our article. Ease of doing business is not a word of gospel. Ease of doing business in other areas like bureaucratic red tape reduction, etc., may be good. But in the case of reducing the environmental regulations and protections, can do more harm than good. If you see the India's framework for environmental laws, they came after big tragedies. Let us try to understand them. Environmental Protection Act 1986 have come into existence after Bhopal gas tragedy. We understood the laxity of environmental protection laws and then we have enacted one. And later, pressure from the various capital industrial interests is undermining all the environmental framework laws which are being kept in this country. How can it be demonstrated? There is one index that is called Global Environmental Performance Index. In this, India is placed at 177th position out of 180 countries. So recent actions of the government is further worsening this situation. Last 2 days you saw environmental impact assessment rules, draft rules are being diluted. And next is Forest Rights Act. This is meant to give greater authority to forest dwellers on their land and on their life. Now the government wanted to dilute this Forest Rights Act. There is also a counter argument. Poaching, etc., has increased after Forest Rights Act, and human-animal conflict also has gone up. That is the counter argument which she did not talk over here. So what she says is the Forest Rights Act dilution is not in the interest of the forests, and the counter argument, the very next article which we are going to, says that Forest Rights Act enactment is one of the reason for the tiger hunting in India or loss of wildlife in India. The second is India's Forest Act 1927 is a draconian law. What it did was all the tribals and forest dwellers, these were declared as illegal occupants of the forests in India. It was a colonial law. Just with one act of 2 pages, the forest dwellers were made illegal occupants of their home. Now, forest bureaucracy has come up. Today, this Indian Forest Act was further strengthened to give forest bureaucracy weapons, protection from prosecution, etc. Next is Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act, which is also called Kampa Act 2016. It did not empower the Grama Sabhas, local governments, etc. So it has devastated the Adivasis, forest dwellers, and Grama Sabhas. Next, Coastal Regulatory Zones notification of 2018. It is today expected to threaten the livelihood of millions of fishermen on coast. And finally, Subramanian Committee, if you remember, it was appointed to look into or review the environmental laws which are existing. This entire committee recommendations are not being given open to us. It appears that government is trying to clandestinely implement the TSR Subramaniam Committee recommendation. So National Board for Wildlife, Expert Appraisal Committee under Environmental Impact Assessment, all these are giving permissions close to wildlife habitations. So that obviously will increase man and animal conflict further and further in India. So in this, finally what she is trying to say, India need to aim to be a green hub with a low carbon growth strategy. This low carbon growth strategy was given by the erstwhile Planning Commission during UPA rule. That is what the essence of the article. The next article is how the tiger can regain its stripes. It is about improving the tiger protection and wildlife protection in India. So, in this, Malenad Tiger Reserve in India and tiger conservation over there stands as an example how a dedicated conservation work can lead to protection of the tigers. During Indira Gandhi era, the Malenad Tiger Reserve is stood as an example. Now, there are two laws which have led to the wildlife protection in India. These have come during the Indira Gandhi era itself. They are Wildlife Protection Act, Forest Conservation Act. Previously, when wildlife and forest protection, these are under the state government, forest lands are being converted into revenue lands. And there was vast destruction of tracts of forest land. After these laws have come, the powers of the state governments have curtailed and alternate afforestation etc. was brought in. In that way, the forests and also wildlife were protected. These above two laws also have reinforced Project Tiger. In this case, the 2000 afterwards, the scenario has changed. The World Bank funded new strategy has come up. This is what has strengthened forest bureaucracy. This strategy is eco-development model strategy. What is the underlying thing of eco-development model? Rather than focusedly conserving the wildlife, this strategy talks about development of a forest ecological system holistically. So this is a very good idea on paper, but when it comes to theory, the forest bureaucracy was more interested in the funds which it is getting from World Bank rather than taking into outcome based targets. That's why this program has more failed. That is called eco development model has made the forest bureaucracy a generalized bureaucracy like IAS rather than a specialized bureaucracy involved with protection of forests. In 2005, when Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, Sariska Tiger Reserve was identified with 0 tigers. Then the central government has appointed Tiger Task Force. What this task force did, it has identified certain tiger reserves where intensive conservation efforts has to go on. But it has neglected other tiger reserves completely. Next, Forest Rights Act, as I said to you before, also has intervened with the protection of wildlife and tiger in particular. Forest Rights Act has allowed for habitations of the tribals and forest dwellers in between the reserves in the forest that has diluted the things. The next is voluntary village relocations are not very successful other than few states. Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh shown some success in voluntary village relocations. Let's take if villages are in between the habitat of the tiger, they will be relocated to a safe place. It is win-win both for conservation and also both for the protection of the life of villagers. It decreases the man-animal conflict. But it is not taken very seriously by the states. And today, government enjoys monopoly over tiger monitoring, tiger management, data generation, etc. And lack of transparency is the major issue. So, what the author proposes is the tiger data shall be made available to the private citizens and other conservation enthusiasts that can improve the situation of wildlife conservation in India. And if we go for another organization, National Tiger Conservation Authority, it has deviated from the focus of conservation of tiger. Now, it talks about snow leopard and translocation of African cheetahs to India like that. So, author says a focused conservation effort on wildlife is essential today. The ecological development model of World Bank has diluted this focused approach which was there before 2000. We need to go back into it. And involvement of the various private stakeholders and increasing the transparency in the data related to wildlife conservation are essential now. The next article is not very important. More than a vaccine, it is about vaccination. What they are emphasizing is vaccination delivery models have to be developed in India now. And already central government is looking at a task force to direct the vaccination delivery. Second, many of the developed wealthy nations wants to corner the vaccine developed by developing countries like India. So a vaccine nationalism has to be avoided, and equitable access to the vaccination is very much important. This is what WHO chief scientist Ms. Soumya Swaminathan has stated a few days back. The next article, it is about Kamala Harris as a running mate. So what this article says is running mate matters. Mr. Joe Biden, the presidential candidate from Democrat Party, chose Indian origin Kamala Harris to be his running mate. So in this context, what she can bring in, how it can change is the question. She has got favorable views towards immigration. She always felt that immigration did good to American economy. And then criminal justice reforms. You know that Black Lives Matter movement is going on in United States of America now. And added to that, she is a strong supporter of human rights. But however, what is the formal base of Mr. Trump? It is about joblessness, especially in the inland regions, especially the mineral belt of United States of America. So in this context, Kamala Harris can pull the rising Indian American community into the mainstream, and also she can win the votes of women and African Americans, immigrants, etc. But still, the Trump holds the many sections of the society, especially the redneck areas which are famously called as Carolinas, etc. That's where these people have to go. Further to this, will it boost the candidacy of Mr. Joe Biden from Indian American community? What the author says is this. Indian American community is settled in the states of California, New York, New Jersey, and then Illinois, etc. All these are the coastal states. Already among these states, Democrats are winning the elections from long back. So, addition of Ms. Kamala Harris may be financially helpful to the campaign because Indian American community is relatively rich. But electorally, it may not make a big difference from this community, as that particular states are already the Democrat states. The next is Harris' appointment could drive 2020 poll campaign. So here the article is very different from heading. In this, let us see the opinions of different people at the Synergia Foundation's symposium. Remember, Mr. Shivshankar Menon, the former NSA of India, says like this. United States of America moving away from Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was mooted by Obama administration, is a big strategic mistake. Because of this, Asia-Pacific never came together, and Asia became China's economic sphere today. So, USA has invited China's might on the economic front in Asia by vacating the space by moving out from Trans-Pacific partnerships. This is what is the biggest mistake of Mr. Trump. And then Mr. David Ignatius also reiterated the same. According to him, new attention on allies and partners is required for Asia, and China's behavior can revitalize the Quad. Quad stands for USA, India, Australia, and Japan. And Menon further states that USA has to return to the fundamental values like democracy, human rights, multilateralism, and working with institutions. See carefully, working with institutions. After Trump became the president, USA moved out of UNESCO, it moved out of UN Human Rights Council, Paris Conference, etc. USA stopped working with the multilateral institutions. It wanted to work itself as alone a nation. That's where he called it as America's first. Actually, this has done more harm to American diplomacy than good. That's what these are trying to say here. A self-reliant foreign policy. In understanding this article, remember the following words. Multi-vector foreign policy. Remember carefully, multi-vector foreign policy. And Joseph Nye, a professor from Stanford, if I am not wrong, says this way. Power with others. The word is power with others. Multi-vector foreign policy, power with others. And India was proud from very beginning about its principle of strategic autonomy. It did not want to involve any country to take advantage by involving in its foreign policy. So, even during Cold War era, the strategic autonomy is stated as its objective and as a principle in foreign relations. The non-alignment movement, everything was born out of this principle of strategic autonomy. But India also is flexible enough to operate this strategic autonomy to its needs. Now and then, it took the help of the bigger powers like USA, USSR to suit to the needs of the day. So let me explore this. In 1962, when India was in war with China, India has requested USA for military help, especially for the supply of arms. Then UK and USA has supplied the arms which India has used against China, though they are delayed. Second is in 1972, right, India, the Bangladesh war, which is about to start. At this time, Indira Gandhi, as a prime minister, went to USSR and signed a Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation. It has tilted global dynamics altogether. So, Prime Minister Vajpayee, during Kargil war, he has welcomed the involvement of the United States of America to stop the war and to ask Pakistan to pull back. It means India has took the help of the major powers as and when required. Today, it appears that Cold War II between USA and China is about to start, or else India is a victim of Chinese imperialism now, and there are tensions at line of actual control. In this context, what shall be the way forward for Indian diplomacy? India need to realize that diversification is the essence of self-reliance and strategic autonomy today. India has to diversify itself its strategic options with various countries. A wide basket of strategic partners, including USA, shall be the sharper focus of India. So, USA also has to be one of the option, but not be the only option. If we keep all the eggs in one basket, that is of USA, India's relations with Russia, Iran, etc., are expected to be strained. That's where the word is diversification is the key, and the next word is multi-vector foreign diplomacy and power with others. These are the words which we need to remember. In East Asia, especially, in the case of West Asia, Middle East, India was able to play this multi-vector diplomacy. It is balancing Saudi Arabia, relations with Israel and Iran, the three axes of powers in this particular region. So India has to have a similar thing in managing the global affairs and to protect its strategic autonomy. That is what author is trying to say here. Shutting the door on Huawei. You know that many of the companies in the China are intricately connected with Chinese government. PLA, that is People's Liberation Army, has direct or indirect involvement with multinational companies originating from China. So as trade and technology are clubbed with politics and army in China, it is proving to be a loss to Chinese companies today. Huawei, a master in 5G technology, is losing orders from USA, UK, India, and many other countries. Now, a domino effect, a ripple effect is expected to be followed soon. So, remember carefully, China has to learn to conduct the trade separate from its politics of the day. The next is mega labs to boost COVID 19 testing. CSIR developed a mega lab called Next Generation Sequencing Machine. It is expected to have higher accuracy rate than today's RT-PCR, and it is also very fast. Second, pandemic will hit education. Access to education and inequalities in education are expected to rise in access, and inequalities are expected to rise because of this pandemic. Next, in Telangana, government has directed the farmers to sow certain crops based on the market demand. So, this regulated sowing as directed by the government is happening first time in India. farmers, 96% of the farmers sown the crops which are recommended by the government, that is paddy, cotton and red gram, which is going to be a new development in agriculture sector. The next article is about artificial intelligence for agricultural innovation. Telangana government has declared 2020 as an year of artificial intelligence, and it has to reach to the farmers, which they call artificial intelligence for agricultural innovation. Next, a startup, that is Skyroot, it has announced that it has successfully testified upper stage rocket engine. What is the name of this? This is called Raman. So this Skyroot was founded by ISRO's Rocket Design Center. So this startup is bringing in new developments in space technology in India. Study finds poor access to abortion drugs. You know, there is regulation on abortion drugs in India to stop sex selective abortions. So, in a study by Foundation for Reproductive Health Services India states that over regulation of drugs is ultimately leading to decreased access to safe, legal, cost effective abortion. 1 lakh loan sanction for street vendors. So it is Pradhana Mantri Street Vendors Atmanirbhar Nidhi, PM Swanidhi, it is called as. According to it, 10,000 rupees will be provided as a loan to the street vendors, which has to be cleared in 1 year. It is to provide for a reliance and also economic continuity during COVID-19. In this context, the loan has to be repaid within 1 year. And second, it is meant to give access to 50 lakh beneficiaries. Nagaland divided over Ravis stand. You have seen series of news in the last 3 days that NSCN IM Isaac Muvaya, it stated that Mr. Ravi, RN Ravi, has to be removed as an interlocutor. On the other side, other groups have come into open like Naga Ho, stating that Mr. Ravi has to be continued. If not, the peace process comes to the first and the entire process will be stopped, which is not in the interest of the Nagas.